Thank you very much to Alzheimer Europe, Jean-Georges and colleagues for the invitation. Just want to say a big thank you on behalf of Interdem, the organisation for psychosocial research in dementia that crosses Europe. Over 60 of our members have been here during the event for meetings and seminars. Our Academy of PhD students and postdocs now numbers over 100, and we're really grateful for all the support that Alzheimer Europe gives us year on year in going forward with this important work. I want to acknowledge my co-authors, Jill Windle, Terry Howson, and Kat Alger, who's in the audience and is very keen to answer any difficult questions that may emerge. Okay, so arts programs for people with dementia. They're just tremendously popular, aren't they? They're all over Europe, all over the world. There are programs involving people with dementia, and a whole range of arts activities from the visual arts, the music, singing for the brain, playlists for life, and so on. All over the world, every conference you go to now, like this morning, there was a brilliant symposium with a whole range of diverse different arts interventions that are being developed. Multiple pathways, visual arts, there's actually working with artists, there's gallery visits, music in a whole range of forms, dance, not just what happened last night, but in a whole range of settings, creative writing, poetry, theatre. You know, you can go on, and isn't that fantastic, the developments of practice. But interesting, when I thought about the theme of this conference, which one of them is, I think about research into practice. It almost sounds like what happens is there's some research which then gets implemented in practice. In this field, it's not like that at all. Okay? What we're talking about, I guess, is excellent practice that's been developed, and research, as we'll see, is struggling to begin to catch up, to make sense of it. We all think of the fantastic work by our colleague John Zeisel, who's one could have many quotes from him, but this is one I like. There's humanity in the making of art. Artists for Alzheimer's enriches the cultural life of people living with Alzheimer's to express their inner selves and lessen the stigma that accompanies the diagnosis. And of course, the Museum of Modern Art program is known across the world, inviting individuals to look at art in the galleries with your family and friends, discuss art with the specially trained educators, discuss themes, artists, and exhibitions. Look at art and then make artwork of your own. And that sort of work has been inspiration to many across the world. As I say, research has a trail behind it. And I guess the aim is now to carry out research on what is viewed as best practice already, with a view to perhaps even feeding in and refining and developing practice, understanding what are the effects of arts programs, and of course, very importantly, adding to the case for investment in these good practice initiatives. As we discussed this morning, the whole point of the issue of sustainability is a big one. Where will the funding come from? So, in preparing this talk, what I've done is to draw together what I understand of the evidence base so far, and then to tell you a little bit about some of the work that we're doing, and to bring that back into a focus on dementia-friendly communities. This is one of the systematic reviews that's been done. Sort of a slight health warning about the title of it. It says art therapies. I just want to make clear that we're not talking about, in this presentation, I'm not talking about programs delivered by trained art therapists. Typically, I'm talking about the therapeutic use of art or just art with art practitioners. And in fact, Renee in her review does include this whole range. But she says that systematically designed, documented, evaluated studies are scarce. And the studies there are have got many limitations. The information given is often vague. They're unclear whether what they're doing is a process of making art or producing a product of art that can then be shown. And sadly, at that point, the voice of people with dementia was often absent. We did our own systematic review a couple of years back, again, very similar, a number of small-scale studies that did indicate that during the activity, during a visual arts activity particularly, there was increased engagement. People were really getting into it and doing it. Our colleague Mike Bird and McPherson in Australia did an evaluation of an art gallery access program in Canberra, Australia. where people were taken from care homes, people with dementia, they visited the gallery, they were inspired then to make artwork, but the effects were all at the time not sustained outside the gallery. I say but that's just the finding. It's in the moment. Does it have to be something that's sustained? That's what we'll discuss. Well, here's somebody who's got a creative bent in producing a title for a paper, in any case. Shall I compare thee to a dose of donepezil? Cultural arts interventions in dementia care research. And this is a review of a whole range of interventions, not just of arts interventions, but wanting to, I suppose, look at where arts interventions fit in the whole panoply of interventions, including drugs, but also other non-pharmacological approaches. And they point out that most art studies don't get into the systematic reviews because they're deemed not to have the appropriate methodology. And one of their conclusions is that we shouldn't follow slavishly the clinical trials approach, that the idea that we have to do certainly not double-blind or even single-blind randomized controlled trials of every sort of intervention program. Maybe there are other ways of looking at evaluation. But also the importance of choosing appropriate outcome measures and recognizing that what may be appropriate for one intervention may be different for another, but also recognizing that for different people, the best outcomes may be different. For some, it may be about mood. For others, it may be about activity. For others, about participation. For others, about identity. And we shouldn't make everybody fit into the same box. Just an example of a recently published study in Aging and Mental Health, Paul Kamick and colleagues, fairly typical of the sorts of studies that are coming out at the moment. Theirs, again, was an art gallery-based intervention. Two different types of gallery, one a traditional art, or an art gallery with traditional art, one a more modern art place. Just 12 people, mild to moderate dementia, and their carers went along for 8 weeks. Again, there was this same looking at the art with trained people and then making art oneself. And a very common finding, everybody enjoyed it. Participants were unanimous in their enjoyment and satisfaction, despite the lack of significance from standardized measures. There was a trend towards the carers reporting reduced burden, but then they did some really good in-depth interviews and they found a positive social impact from feeling more socially included. People with dementia reporting that their cognitive function had improved and an improved quality of life, but it didn't come out in the measures. Maybe there's something wrong with the measures. They tried to then, in a nice paper in the Gerontologist just earlier this year, tried to understand a bit more about how art gallery interventions might impact on people with dementia and their carers. They talk about the gallery setting, about how important it was to people to be ordinary users of a community place. And we could debate whether when people with dementia go to the galleries, they should be open to the public at the same time. I think at Mama they don't. They go on closed days. But in here they went on days when it was open, and that was important, that they were just seen as ordinary members of the public. Somewhere different, somewhere to go. But the idea that a gallery is a special and a valued place, so it's a good place to go. The idea of intellectual stimulation, art as a universally engaging interest, the development of competency as people found aspects of art that they could actually produce themselves, and the idea of engagement. But also impact on social relationships. Interaction, of course, as one talks about the art with other people with dementia, carers and so on. Carers feeling some respite because they're not responsible for the person during the visit. Some carers chose not to go in the gallery and went off to the cafe, I guess. Others looked at the art themselves. And changed perceptions. The idea that people could actually change in a different sort of environment. People getting a different view of the person with dementia. So some very interesting themes emerging there. And a nice triangle that they produced in terms of the relationship of these different aspects. So you've got the valued place of the gallery, you've got intellectual stimulation, social interaction, both good things, but then affecting both the individual, the dyad, the person with dementia, and the carer, but also people in the wider community. And that's a theme that I'm going to keep coming back to. So in our team, we've been impressed by the idea that it might change things in the moment. But we're not very good at even evaluating change in the moment. And so we've looked at a whole range of measures and come down with some observational measures, things you can actually record either on video or face-to-face, what actually happens during an activity session. We use a scale developed in the States called the Greater Cincinnati Chapter Wellbeing Scale, which includes a number of domains of well-being, including interest, self-esteem, pleasure, sustained attention, and sadness. And Kat Auger, in her PhD study, used this scale in several care homes, looking at these group programs with a creative artist, again trying to build in gallery visits. We don't have a museum of modern art in North Wales, but we have Real Library, and that's about as far as our art galleries go, but we're working on it. But there's still art, and people can appreciate art and interact with it wherever it is. Using that scale, she compared people's response within art sessions with their response in other activities and in unstructured time in the care home. So people acted as their own controls. So we could see, does art actually make a difference compared with other sorts of activities? The other activities were ones that were running in the home anyway. These were things like physical exercise, singing, carpet bowls. What she found was that pleasure did increase over the period of the 8 weeks of the study compared with the control conditions. But in most domains, what you saw was that people had higher well-being in art sessions, higher well-being in other activities, low well-being in unstructured time. So it didn't seem generally to make a big difference what the activity was in terms of in-the-moment response. In fact, for the group as a whole, there were improvements at the end, but you can't attribute them directly, of course, to the art because there wasn't a separate control group, both in quality of life and in communication. So these are just a couple of typical graphs from the study. Here we see the art session from time 1 to time 2. Right from the beginning, that people are showing a lot of sustained attention, and that's maintained. In the unstructured time, there's not a lot of sustained attention. If anything, it goes down. In the other activity, it's quite a high level, maybe not as high as the art, but close to it. This is pleasure, the increase in pleasure over the time of the art sessions from week 1 and 2 to week 7 and 8. Unstructured time, again, not a lot of pleasure. But the other activity, also quite a lot of pleasure. So we've now got a major project called Dementia and Imagination at Bangor University. My colleague Jill Windle is the PI for that. It's funded not by our normal Medical Research Council, but by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So we're really pleased about that. And this is evaluating these sorts of programs in a number of different settings, in care homes in Newcastle, in community groups in North Wales, and in NHS wards in the northwest of England. So far, over 100 people with dementia have participated and over 100 carers and care staff. One of the great things about this is we've got research artists who are actually involved in the whole research process, but also the dissemination. So it's really putting the whole thing into a different sort of framework from the one we normally work in. And we've been able to ask, what effects does it have on other people in the community? Not just the person with dementia, not just the family carer or the care staff, but others. And that's, I think, really important. We're trying to look at attitudes to dementia and the role these groups have in changing this. These are just a few photographs from some of the groups you see on the right there, the people looking at artwork, making comments, being inspired, hopefully, to produce something of their own. People working on a number of different media with art, producing a whole range of things. Just a couple of quotes from one particular participant. I didn't do very much, to tell you the truth. I tended to be mixed up with about 3 other people, and we produced things between us at roughly different stages in the lessons. I'm not entirely sure of art, but there's certain things in the aspect of art, or there's art in everything, isn't there? I mean, whether you're a fisherman, whether you're a motor mechanic, whether you're a pilot, there's always something working in the brain, has to work, and it works for different people with different things, different times. His wife said something different. She said it's opened his eyes to that because he gets a bit depressed sometimes and says he's useless when he can't do things that he wants to do. But I think it's probably opened his eyes that it's not the end of the world. There's still a life to be had. He doesn't nap as much now, I've noticed since. And when he's more talkative, sometimes he's very quiet. And this was something I noticed. One afternoon, we got back early. This was to the library where the sessions were. We went upstairs to have a look, and they could look down into where the art was happening. And we could look straight down into the session. I was amazed by how much he was talking to other people. So you can see that theme of how people's perceptions change when people are engaged in art activities. And this is the artist. She's really into the art aspect of it. He's describing the copper process. His work was completely fluent. He's had a strong voice, clear. He kept returning to a piece he'd left at home of a farm, described it in detail. Two of the pieces were representational, a delicate fence and a tree and a ship in a whirlwind at sea. So he's really engaged in this sort of work in sessions, between sessions. And this is some of the artwork that this particular gentleman produced. So, what about the effects on the wider community? Our results are still at an early stage, and our dissemination is sort of tentative, but we've held 3 workshops across the summer for healthcare and social care practitioners, care home staff, artists, carers, people with dementia. 128 people attended. Each of them completed a postcard at the beginning and end of the day, 2 postcards. One, they completed the phrase dementia is, the second was art can. And so here are the results of that. So before, in terms of dementia is loss, memory loss. Afterwards, memory's gone down a bit, more about misunderstood, more about support, different activities. So a bit of a shift there, perhaps, in attitude. In terms of art can, before, it was about art helping to express feelings. Afterwards, it's about people. About fun. Fun's become much bigger. Inspire. So you can see how people are beginning to change as they begin to understand that people with dementia can engage and can produce work that's interesting and has meaning. We've been able to show the project at a number of exhibitions and festivals. In Wales, we have both a national and an international Eisteddfod. That's our big cultural festival, music, poetry, literature, art. And also at the Green Man Festival, which is a much broader sort of festival, bringing dementia to a different context and audience. And our research artists have been very active in trying to bring positive messages about dementia and challenging stigma, because challenging stigma means about social inclusion. It means about giving and receiving, recognizing people with dementia can make a contribution. And we were just knocked out. 814 people had in-depth conversations about arts and dementia at this festival. It was muddy, it was wet, because it was Wales, obviously, but, and these weren't just, polite conversations. 150 of those people gave their details to receive the newsletter. They're actually that interested in taking it forward. So we think, I must tell you about Doris and Ivor. Our research artist has created Doris and Ivor, D&I, Dementia and Imagination, Doris and Ivor, which is a car that doesn't work very well, but it's taken around on a trailer to festivals, and it portrays this imaginary couple who are living and enjoying living well with dementia. And it's a conversation piece, it's an art piece, if you like, an installation piece that people engage with. And this is at one of the festivals, the stall there and the exhibition that people enjoy, celebrating achievement. Okay, so let's just round up, because I think time is against us. I think one of the questions we have to ask is, what works for whom? Shouldn't we expect that there'll be individual differences? We're not going to have arts programs as the intervention for dementia, and that's going to make a difference to everybody. We've got to get better at tailoring our interventions to the right sort of people. But it doesn't have to be people who've previously done art. People do respond to doing things that are different and finding skills and competences they didn't know they had. Are all activities equal? Is it as much to have armchair exercises, to play bowls and skittles? Well, my feeling is that probably in the moment, those things can be just as good. But I think arts programs probably have a privileged role in reducing stigma. If we'd gone around the festivals and said, look, people with dementia in care homes, they can do armchair exercises, they can play skittles. What people are interested in is that people with dementia are live people who can actually do something that you say, wow, I can see something in that. I can see what they were getting at. Yes, it doesn't sell for $4 million, Well, not yet anyway, but we're working on it. But, you know, people see a value and a meaning in what people are doing. And, of course, it allows people with dementia to contribute, not just to be a recipient, but to offer something back. And maybe that's really important in our dementia-friendly communities. But then you've got to think, well, what's the balance between output and process? Do we want artists working with people with dementia saying, no, that's not good enough, we won't be able to show that? Of course not. We want people to be just facilitated to produce what they want to produce so that they're in control. Artists need, you know, a good personality and communication skills and patience and excellent communication to be able to work in this way. And we think it's really important to have the person with dementia in the gallery, because that's what's going to contribute to the dementia-friendly community. It's not about just people coming into places where people with dementia are, it's about people with dementia being visible and their contribution being visible in places where the public are. And that's what's going to lead to a dementia-friendly community in this domain. A long page of acknowledgements, because lots of people are involved in this work, lots of funders. Thank you very much for your attention.